Good evening. Good evening. Tayo.
Or student member of the Board of Education debate. My name is Michelle Fidel, and I am class secretary of education. I will be tonight's moderator. It's super exciting to be sitting on the dais, as I usually give the class update at the podium, but now I'm here tonight moderating tonight's debate. Before we begin the debate, will everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here is how tonight's debate will work. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to speak and to introduce themselves. Speakers will begin in alphabetical order by last name. Questions for the candidates have been submitted by the members of CRASC as well as online via our website, www.aacps.org/CRASC. We will not be taking questions from the audience. The candidates did not have the opportunity to review the question prior to the debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question with an optional 30-second rebuttal. Speakers will be given a 15-second reminder during the debate and any rebuttals. We are limiting rebuttals to 2 per question per candidate. Please be advised that this debate is being broadcasted live on AACPS TV and via AACPS YouTube channel. As a recommendation for our non-English speaking audience, you may turn on closed captions in a translated language on the YouTube channel. Como recomendación para nuestra audiencia que no habla inglés, puedes activar los subtítulos en un idioma traducido en el canal de YouTube. Once all questions have been addressed, tonight's debate will be concluded. At this time, we would like everyone to silence their cell phones. Now, we will start with introduction. First up, Indu Badala from Glen Burnie High School.
Good evening, AACPS. My name is Indu Badala, and I'm a junior at Glen Burnie High School. I'm so honored to be running to be your next student member of the Board of Education. Student leadership and advocacy has always been an integral part of who I am today. But 10 years ago, I would have never expected to be sitting in this chair and speaking in front of all of you. That is because 10 years ago, I was a struggling ESOL student who faced constant alienation and felt aimless in my educational journey. I was different. And in a society that capitalizes on directing hate and bigotry toward anyone who dares be unique, it was scary to be different. Which is a shame, because true meaningful change can only be brought when we embrace our differences. That is why, if elected, I will work to ensure we are elevating all students and creating school communities that unite over and cherish our diversity. This will be achieved through diversifying our curriculums and teacher hirings to include more POC, LGBTQIA, and women perspectives to ensure ample representation and inclusion within education. I also know that my journey to where I am now was only possible because of doting parents and loving teachers who are willing to dedicate their time and energy into helping me succeed. A privilege that is not extended to all students because, unfortunately, in our society, your zip code does influence your quality of education, and this needs to change. Education is a fundamental right. And if elected, I will work tirelessly to eliminate educational barriers and ensure every student feels supported through implementing equitable educational initiatives in marginalized communities, such as collaborating with local libraries to implement SAT, ACT prep, homework tutoring, and college and career coaching. I will also advocate for equitable allocation of funds and additional support systems to schools who have historically fallen below that achievement gap, and a following equity audit to ensure accountability and that these services are actually efficient. I have always greatly treasured the power of student leadership, simply because together our voices form a cacophony of stories, perspectives, and ideas that will lead to progressive and impactful change. Student voice will always be my reason to serve as your SMOB. If elected, I will prioritize empowering you through bolstering civic engagement, through expansion of voter registration, and testimony workshops. Furthermore, I will establish a SMOB Teen Advisory Council and quarterly SMOB town halls so students can easily connect with me. However, student voice can only flourish when students feel safe and supported in their schools. As your SMOB, I will dedicate my term to enriching student life through expanding mental health services and introducing new innovative solutions, such as collaborating with rehab centers and health clinics to address drug addiction and regressing student mental health. I will also be placing an emphasis on school safety, environmentalism, and expanding college and career readiness. You students deserve a SMOB who is dedicated, experienced, and passionate. As a student who not only experienced firsthand the faults of our school system, but also dedicated
Time. Thank you, Indu.
thank you, everyone.
Next up, Eric Lynn from Severna Park High School.
Good evening, AACPS students. Good evening, AACPS students. It is a pleasure to speak before you all, and I thank you for joining tonight's debate. My name is Eric Lynn. I'm a junior at Severna Park High School, running to be your 50th student member of the board. My parents immigrated to the United States when they were 19, searching for greater opportunities. They settled in Anne Arundel County, believing that its rich diversity and highly ranked schools would provide the high quality educational experience for my brother and me that they had never received. But for far too long, that promise of a quality AACPS education has yet to reach all students in our county. Despite being one of the leading school systems in the state, the challenges that students and their families face continue to go unsolved. If elected, I intend to tackle these challenges from the day I step into office by creating purposeful reforms to our curriculum, policies, and operating principles. As a lifelong AACPS student at 4 different schools across the county, I've experienced firsthand the inequities students face based on what zip code they live in. I will work to bridge that opportunity gap between the students of different districts and backgrounds by advocating for a budget advantageous to our lesser privileged schools. I will push for a strong capital budget, ensuring all students have access to a high quality learning environment with adequate resources. In addition, I will fight to provide more funding for student support services, to create wellness centers at all secondary schools, and expand access to therapy services and psychologists for free, enabling a greater focus on the true mental health and well being of all AACPS students. Furthermore, I will work to improve our students' quality of life by implementing new workload relief policies and wellness initiatives. I will I will overhaul our outdated curriculum and implement innovative measures such as offering free SAT and ACT prep and expanding access to early childhood education to enhance student academic and social success within our schools. I will work on modeling neighboring districts and updating outdated board policies that no longer serve to benefit you, the students, such as our dress code and lateness attendance policy for athletics. You deserve a SMOB with the leadership and advocacy experience to turn ideas into reality. As an officer of my school's SGA, class council, and county student council CRASC, I have experience collaborating with others to get things done. Furthermore, as the chair of the Financial Literacy Committee for the Anne Arundel County Youth Advisory Council, I have insight into how our local government works and what we need to do to fund our schools fully. I am also a part of the Maryland Association of Student Councils, where I have connected with SMOBs from across the state. Through this, I have learned what it takes to be successful in this position and what positive changes I can bring to our county to help us grow. Together, we can bring real change into our schools and classrooms that elevate all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Lastly but not least, Taryn Reinhart from Annapolis High School.
Good evening, everyone in Anne Arundel County, and thank you so much for letting me sit in front of you and tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm one of 4 kids. Sorry about my voice. I'm one of 4 kids, and my younger sister is 14. Her name is Destiny, and she has severe special needs. Growing up, I didn't realize how significant that was in Anne Arundel County until I was 11 years old, and one day was called down to be illegally questioned about her and how she has been mistreated in our Anne Arundel County schools. And to me, that can't be our normal, and that can't be something that we live with every day. Students being injured, students having broken legs, students not being safe at their schools because of something they can't control. That's why if elected, my biggest thing that I will work on and my prime focus will be building a sense of belonging for each student. Each student deserves to feel safe and like they are welcome and like their school cares about them as they walk into their building through the doors of their school every day. That's why I will work with the individual schools to cater to their specific needs. Because as a member, I went to Annapolis Elementary School, which was a very small school, but it was Title I. So that meant we had to cater to a very different need of students. Because as Indu and Eric both said, our zip code does in fact affect what we get and what resources we are provided with. That's why I will make sure that we have more unified programs across the county, because I believe that it is very important that all students get a sense of belonging and that opportunity to feel involved, even if they're not necessarily the best soccer player or the richest soccer player. And again, furthermore, with that, I will also work to increase diversity and inclusion in all of our programs by instituting intramural teams and intramural clubs for all students during their lunch blocks, so that way students can feel like they don't have to stay after school or have extra resources in order to participate and feel like they belong at their schools. And as I said, my prime focus is to work towards you, the students. That's why, if elected, I will make sure every day that I am working towards you by helping you and making sure I'm listening to you, by checking in with your schools and your administrators and coming to your schools and asking you, what problems are you facing? Because as someone who's seen that with my younger sister and someone who's had to work to advocate for that at the state level with legislation, I believe the best thing that we can do is make sure that all students feel like they're involved and all students feel like that I'm listening to them, which is what I will offer you as SMOB. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Taryn, and thank you, candidates. Now we will begin with the questions. First question, we'll start with Indu. This question is inspired by the submission from Sophia from Severna Park High School. Share a few of your greatest character traits that you think would make you an effective SMOB and capable of representing the students of AACPS.
Thank you, Sophia, for the amazing question. I say one important character trait is definitely my perseverance. My experience in student leadership has had a lot of ups and downs, especially when you're working with other adults. You know that sometimes all your policies, all of your goals and initiatives will not always pass through. But the important thing about a leader is that you don't fall down and just give up as soon as your policies don't work. You want to keep trying and keep fighting for your constituents and fellow student leaders. And that has always been an integral component and role for me. Additionally, I would say my experience as a student commissioner on the Joint Joint Commission on the Opportunity Gap, I have worked for years on making sure that we are addressing educational inequities. I have experience in policy writing, advocacy, and making sure that I fully represent my peers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Eric.
So first and foremost, my dedication to you, the students. So as if elected as student member of the board, I will work tirelessly to work with you to implement policies that you want to see in our school system. Furthermore, my creativity and innovation, I'm always striving to find creative solutions to problems. So I want you to know that, if there's an issue that's going on in your school, that I will work to find creative solutions to help you. And then finally, I think most importantly, for this position and being an active listener, which is definitely something that I consider myself to be. I will be sure to listen to the students, the parents, the staff members, the community stakeholders, everybody who has a say in our school system's operations to make sure that we are doing the best that we can.
Thank you. Taryn?
So thank you, Sophia, for that wonderful question. I think the first trait that I offer is my discipline, and I run cross country and track. And I will say those are two of the most grueling sports I've ever run because all you have to do is go out there and run on your own. So that has taught me a lot of discipline and working hard towards you guys. The other thing is my initiative. As I mentioned earlier, last year I testified in front of the Maryland Senate for a Senate bill that would affect education in our schools, or the education across the state. And I did that because I spoke up and said I want to speak, and I feel like a student voice should be heard. So I think these two traits, as well as paired with the fact that my time management is pretty good, I'd say, considering I'm a student in the IB program, which is rather rigorous. I think all put together, this makes me someone who will stand up for what you believe in and stand up for you guys and work tirelessly for it.
Thank you. Are there any rebuttals at this moment? Okay, moving on. So this question, Eric, you will start this. Identify a time or experience that motivated you to pursue this position.
Sure. So originally, at the beginning of this year, I wasn't sure if I wanted to run for this position or not, just because, this was my first year getting involved in student government in the county level, the state level. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to run for this position. But, after having the opportunity to speak with, many current SMOBs from across the state and just learning how awesome, some of their policies are, and seeing that, we don't have that here was one of my driving factors into running for this position, was to implement those similar policies into AACPS to benefit our student body.
Thank you. Next, Taryn.
So for me personally, I think that when I was a freshman in Anne Arundel County, I was reintroduced into the Anne Arundel County system after not being in it for middle school during COVID, during a pandemic, during virtual school. And for me, I logged on to that first day and saw a wall of icons of names. I had no idea who they were. And I knew maybe 3 people at my entire high school of 2,200 students. And to me, I just felt like all of virtual learning, I wasn't connecting with students, and the county, the school, and just the system didn't feel like they were listening to me and what I needed at that time, which was a way to connect. So that's why after that, my mom told me one day, she was like, look, you can run for student member of the board. And I was like, does that mean I can get my voice heard and I can feel like someone will listen to me? And once I realized that, I've wanted to do that ever since. So for the last 3.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Indu.
Well, I would say I mostly fell in love with the student member on the Board of Education position in middle school when I had the opportunity to get involved through my school SGA. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to run, but after coming to Glen Burnie High School, a school that is composed of a heavily marginalized community that has faced so many barriers within education, and we as a school community, and I know a lot of schools in the northern part of county feel that we are not represented at the Board of Education. We are constantly being faced with inadequate policies, and talking to my peers and seeing the issues really motivated to be a representative for those students who don't have a voice, the students who are not able to be as privileged and get these opportunities. And I was motivated by the student voice, motivated by the issues to bring an impactful and lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Next question, we'll start with Taryn. Do you anticipate any challenges with this role, and what will you do to resolve these challenges?
Well, as I think that we should all take into account is AACPS is a very diverse county. So I think making sure that I'm representing all students as best as possible and not favoring one group over the other could be a very potential issue I'm facing. Because at the end of the day, I will be representing the students, but sometimes what may benefit one student may hurt another. So I think to overcome that, my plan is to make sure that I reach out to any party that this could affect, and reach out to individual schools so that way I can talk to a wide range of students from across the county to make sure we have lots of students, no matter their socioeconomic status, ethnicity, language, or anything, to make sure that they feel like that they do have a say. And that way I can make sure I'm making the best decisions and advocating for the things that will benefit the most students in the most significant way. Thank you.
Indu?
I would say the biggest conflict will be the fact that I won't be the only person working on this. We're going to have to collaborate and make sure that we're working as a team with numerous different board members. And at the end of the day, I am one student, and there's no way, if elected, that I could just by myself make sure that I can gather everyone's perspectives. And that is issue, making sure that we're having every single students, parents, and community stakeholders involved in this educational process. But the best way to resolve this is making sure that I am a parent and involved in the community. This means going out to individual school districts, meeting with those communities, meeting with those parents, families, and students, having, similar to how Dr. Bedell had those listening and learning tours, implementing similar initiatives so I can better understand my constituents, my students, and making sure that I am representing and taking their views to the Board of Education.
Eric?
So one of the most important things for me is that I believe that students should be aware of what's going on at the board, and that students should, have a say in those decisions that are impacting their education. But the challenge comes, how do we reach out to all of our students? Luckily, I'm the Secretary of Communication for CRAS, so I have plenty of experience reaching out to students. So there's 3 things I want to do to tackle this challenge of making sure that every student feels represented. So first and foremost, I'd like to go out and visit schools, especially during their lunch periods, visiting schools, chatting with students, getting to know what's going on at their schools, if there's any, issues that they want me to look into for them. Secondly, and this is something that I've mentioned at every school I visited, is creating a student ambassador program at every school, that meets with their administration on a monthly basis to talk about what's going on in their schools, if there's any issues that need to be solved. But also, these students would be a part of the SMOB Advisory Council so that they can bring information from the board directly back to the students of their schools. Thank you.
Are there any rebuttals at this time? Okay, moving on to the next question, which Indu, you will start. How would you go about gaining input on school issues from across the county?
Thank you, Michelle. I think this is kind of similar to the past question, but definitely making those school visitations, being within your school communities, and having initiatives similar to the listening and learning tours, as Dr. Bedell said. I kind of mentioned this previously, but the best way you can serve your community is understanding your community. So being in those schools, being in those neighborhoods and communities, because we know across the county, each school, each community has a variety of issues that are impacting them. So better understanding those issues. Additionally, having like a SMOB advisory council. I mentioned I want middle school and high school perspectives across the board. So having 2 to 3 representatives from each school who will meet with me and convey their concerns and things that they'll see in their school. Because at the end of the day, whoever, like the student member, is only one person, and every day we're not going to be in every single school. So making sure that we're getting easy flow of information. And it's also maintaining a strong social media presence. Kids are always on social media. It is a new platform, a new media. So making sure that I'm effectively utilizing it. And for students who don't have that, having newsletters and working with Bright Spaces, which is a common platform that all students are using every day.
Eric?
So one of the things I mentioned earlier was my student ambassador program, and the inspiration for this idea was that I had seen that some schools had a program where they had a bunch of representatives at their school, that would meet with administration and, like I said, talk about issues going on in their schools. The problem is that not every school has this, and I think that they should. And like I mentioned earlier, making sure that those students are also connected with the SMOB Advisory Council and modeling school districts like Montgomery County, where they have 20 to 25 people from each school coming to these SMOB advisory meetings or attending these meetings, so that they are able to provide input into what is going on at their schools, and so we can find creative solutions to help resolve those issues. And then also, like I said earlier, bringing information from the board directly back to the students of their school. And additionally, as I mentioned earlier, school visits. Being a senior that has a half-day schedule, I'll actually be able to visit schools during their lunch periods and talk to as many students as possible. Thank you.
Taryn?
So that's a great question, and I think the best way that we can reach out to students is through school visitations, social media, and also through the adults at those schools. So school visitations, I think that making sure all students feel like I'm actually coming to them in person, because there's something to be said for in person, and I learned that during COVID. If I having someone talk to me in person is much more engaging than over a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet. So I think making sure we have either me or a student ambassador or someone there reaching out in person and saying, "Hey, what are you concerned about? What would you like us to try and work on?" Additionally, social media, I think keeping an open email and an open Google form of some sort that all students can constantly access with any questions or concerns. So that way we can also do it digitally and constantly pushing that out, like I said, through administration and SGAs, which are great ways to make sure all students are hearing what needs to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Moving on to the next question, which will start with Eric. In what circumstances have you had experience with diverse groups of students, and how has it affected your views? How will you go about representing the interests of those Anne Arundel County citizens whose backgrounds and perspectives differ from your own?
So I serve on the Anne Arundel County Youth Advisory Council. So I work, with County Executive Pittman and also his staff to give input into our county's operations and what we're doing, what we could be doing better. And these are students, young student leaders, just like myself, from across the county, from Crofton, northern to southern, eastern, western. So I definitely have that experience working with students from, different backgrounds. My plan really is, like I said, my plan really is making sure that students feel that they can always reach out to me. I've mentioned at every single one of my school visits that my DMs are always open for students who may not feel comfortable asking a question in front of a group. I definitely am one of those people where if you reach out to me with a question, I will be happy to answer it. So making sure students feel that they can reach out to me with their issues and that I will be there to listen and solve their problems. Thank you.
Taryn?
So Annapolis High School was recently named an ESPN Top 5 Unified Champion School, which is a national recognition that picks 5 schools across the entire country, elementary, middle, high school, and colleges and universities, which is a pretty big honor. But so with this, we had a huge unified celebration at the end of March, where we had tons of students from all over the school playing in a student faculty basketball game that also had a unified portion, which means students with developmental disabilities and students without developmental disabilities were playing together. And as the Best Buddies chapter president for the 2023-2024 school year, I was integral in planning that and coordinating that and making sure all students felt involved. So I was there working with students of all ability levels, and from that experience, I've learned the importance of having multiple ways of communicating things and multiple ways to get information across. That way, all students, however they may receive or learn differently, and or however they may want to approach differently, I'm very well experienced in that.
Indu?
I previously mentioned I am a junior at Glen Burnie High School. Glen Burnie High School is well known for being incredibly diverse. We have immigrant students, we have students who their first language isn't English. We have students from low income families, students who have disabilities, and I've as a student at this school, I've seen firsthand that how marginalized our school can be, how we do not have access to equitable resources. Furthermore, I serve on the Joint Commission on the Opportunity Gap, a group that's solely dedicated to addressing educational equity. Here, I've seen shocking statistics, including the fact that over 30% of our students live in poverty. So how is the best way to address this? Well, redistricting. Next year, our primary focus on the board is going to be redistricting, and its focus will be northern schools. So making sure that I, as a student at Glen Burnie, of students where I've seen overwhelming numbers of overpopulation, teachers who are overwhelmed, just making sure that my voice is apparent and that I'm representing those students to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Okie dokie. So next question will start with Taryn. How will you work to build consensus with your fellow student leaders and other board members?
So I think the best way to build consensus is ensure that we hear all different differing perspectives and viewpoints. And I'm a member in the IB diploma program, which basically means anytime I have a test in a class, it's a paper and they tell you to write, give me an argument and a counter argument for this, whether it's about a book or even a math problem. I've done it sometimes. So just with that, I've had to learn how to recognize and anticipate differing perspectives. So I will make sure that I listen to both perspectives. And at the end of the day, I take into account all of the information that is being presented to me and all of the perspectives and all of the viewpoints, and making sure that anything I do, I will come in and make an appraisal at the end, because that is actually what I have to do for my IB papers. So I've been doing it for months. I've written dozens of papers about it. So I definitely will make sure that I can listen to all of your viewpoints and make sure everyone's heard. Thank you.
Indu?
Similar to what Taryn said, perspectives are important, but also we have to understand, and like I have especially have understood this during my term on CRASC and also the Joint Commission. Your way is not always a highway. So it's the idea that we are getting different perspectives, that we are reaching out to your students, we are reaching out to, you're working with collaboratively with your board members and reaching a compromise where all parties are happy that we are still addressing student needs. It's so important that we go out and we talk to students, we ask them their views on different policies and how will it impact those school communities, and taking those viewpoints and creating something, a policy or initiative that appeases everyone that's involved, because it's not always going to be one school, it's not always going to be one community, it's going to be everyone in the county.
Eric?
So, as a student member of the board, it's important for me to make decisions that benefit the students. And so sometimes the reality is that there can be ideas at times of mine that maybe there are ways to improve upon those ideas. So what I plan on doing to make sure that we're building consensus is collaboration and compromise. So making sure that rather than just, like Indu said, thinking that my ideas are the best or the only ideas that can be out there, listening to other board members, maintaining active listening, and listening to other perspectives, and really making sure that the decisions that we're making are solely to benefit students. Additionally, building strong relationships with board members is something that's going to be important to me. As a student, I recognize that automatically coming in, it might be as a student coming in, I might be seen as a little lesser, but really building strong relationships and connections with board members to show them that I am here just like them to help students and to improve our school system so that my voice can be seen
Time.
as equal.
Any rebuttals? Moving on. Next, Indy will start. How can the school system support students affected by mental health crisis, and how will you help reduce the stigma of mental health with your position?
Thank you, Michelle. It's important that we talk about mental health. It is an integral component of all student life. And the best way to address this is having courageous conversations. So throughout my platform, I've always advocated that we have community forums where we're meeting with school system staff, teachers, parents, and talking about the importance of mental health and how we need to practice and expand our mental health resources. So it's having these courageous conversations. It's also expanding resources. Anne Arundel County has one of the most outrageous student to counselor ratio in this country. It's important that we're expanding these positions, but also implementing a school youth program or work program that makes sure that more students are excited about going into a possible mental health career. It's also making sure that we're working with schools and having these opportunities transparent, accessible, and having programs that will help students easily be able to access these resources.
So one of the
Sorry, Eric.
So one of the things that's important in my platform is expanding access to therapy services and psychologists for free, modeling other counties like Montgomery County. And so one of the reasons why I think this is important is because we have students who have families who maybe don't have access to these resources, or have families who don't necessarily believe in those resources. And in order to truly maintain the well-being of our students, it is important that we give them access to these resources free of charge. Secondly, it's also important to me that we're maintaining proactivity. So rather than, just trying to solve this crisis, what can we do to, prevent this crisis from happening in the first place? So one, as Indu mentioned, reducing our counselor to student ratio to make sure that students can meet with their counselors on a quarterly basis and establish relationships so they feel comfortable talking to each other. Second, workload relief policies that I have in my platform, such as making sure that students can't be assigned work over school system breaks. Really, just making sure that our students are getting the time to relax and get themselves together.
Time. Taryn?
So I think instituting a lot of programs is obviously something that we do need to do, but a lot of the time students don't feel comfortable going to teachers with these concerns. And as someone who struggled with anxiety in the past, I will say I don't always feel comfortable going to my counselor with an issue, and because I only see my counselor maybe like 3 times a year. So I think maybe something like quarterly check-ins are great is a great idea, but I think furthermore instituting opportunities where teachers or advisors or counselors approach the students themselves is a great way to do this, by giving every single teacher a mental health training, because a lot of the time students will connect with a certain teacher they have over a counselor they see once a year for course selection. So I think making sure that all teachers are trained in mental health, and how to deal with student mental health, and also making sure that each advisor during their wellness blocks checks in with their students is a great way to make sure that each student is being heard all the time.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
I do want to
Oh,
add quick. Oh, sorry.
We're going to start with Indu.
Okay, I do want to add on that we shouldn't only be focusing on increasing counselors, but also more mental health specialists, because we know that counselors are already overwhelmed with workload and with course scheduling. So it's important that we're employing people like social workers, psychologists, more individuals who have more of an expansive knowledge about different mental health policies. Thank you.
Next up, Eric.
I agree with Indu, and also I do like the idea of having our teachers be involved in that. But I feel like we are already putting so much pressure onto our teachers that I think it's important that we realize that training, to be mental health professionals, we should be leaving that to professionals that are dedicated to mental health and for students, which is why the free access to psychologists and therapists is something that I'm really pushing for.
Taryn?
I think that again, instituting more psychologists and teacher and counselors or whatever it may be for students, it's a great idea. But again, a lot of the time students don't feel comfortable approaching these people, and that's why I think we also need to have it on someone they see every day, like a teacher or a counselor. Or I think just at the end of the day, making sure that each student has someone at their school they can go to, someone who checks in with them weekly, someone who checks in with them monthly, but someone who they see outside of these check-ins, who knows about them outside of this.
Any other rebuttals? Indu?
I had one more rebuttal. Sorry, 1 second. Regarding Eric, I know you mentioned that you were talking about expanding these services and making psychologists free, right? But I just wanted you to kind of inform everyone that psychologists are already available and present in your schools. So this would always already be a free service because it's going to be within your schools.
Great point, Indu. So the problem with that is that our school psychologists, there's only one at every school, and some of them, work at multiple schools. So it's really hard to have access to them when they're only at our schools for certain days of the week, or only at and there's one of them and like 1,000, 2,000, almost 3,000 students at some schools. So it's important to recognize that following counties that have contracted out services, so that students can access those services online 24/7 for free, is really important to me because students should be able to have access at any time.
Time. Okay. So next question is going to start with Eric, and this is the fun question. So, from any animated movie, name a character that you identify with and why.
Okay, let me think about this one. Animated movie. Okay. I would say this is gonna be weird. Um, I feel like Wally because because Wally, he's this one person trying to, really bring back he's fighting for environmental justice, right? He's trying to bring back the earth and everything. He's fighting for that while everybody else is, doesn't believe in what he's saying. And I feel like that's sometimes me. I feel like I am, advocating for something that I think is important, but there are just people. There's just other people, don't see that same thing. So really, as a student member of the board, recognizing that and still continuing to push for what students believe in and what students want to see in our school district.
Taryn?
So over quarantine that summer of 2020, I think I watched Frozen 1 and Frozen 2 about 600 times. My younger sister loved it. So, but over that, I used to be able to quote the movie, but the character I always loved was Anna because she was super outgoing. She loved talking to people, but she also like was kind of tenacious and never took no for an answer. Like her sister literally like built a castle to get away from her, and she still went after her. So it's just kind of that is like to me, I've always kind of very much empathized with because to me, I've never taken no for an answer. I mean, you can shut the door on me, but I'm still gonna stick my foot in. And I think just over I also just I mean, she's super fun. She's a good singer, which I'm not, but she's also a hopeless romantic, which is another thing I can relate to. So I think I don't know. Anna, she was always the person I liked the most in those movies and made watching Frozen bearable.
Indu?
You said any animator, right? Okay, so I would say Joy from Inside Out because I am someone who, if you know me, you know I love talking. I would like to consider myself as a positive person who loves just sharing positivity. And that is one of my biggest goals as your student member is making sure that we as a county are embracing wellness, that we are spreading more positivity, kindness, and that we're embracing each other as a community, that we're trying to limit divisiveness. And that is really what Joy was doing. She was trying to make everyone a little bit happier. And that's what I would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Okay. Moving on to the next question, we'll start with Taryn. How does the student board member relate to CRASC, and how would you go about collaborating with fellow student leaders?
So I think that student member of the board and CRASC go hand in hand, oftentimes because CRASC is something that where student leaders go to, and then after that, those will be the ones that probably contact the SMOB the most and are keeping up to date with what's happening at the SMOB, which is what is happening at the board the most of the time. So I think making sure that I am continuously talking to them because I know they're the ones who are probably also working on policies and stuff in reaction to whatever I'm passing and whatever I'm advocating for. So making sure that I'm helping them and giving them a slightly easier job than the really hard job that they have to make sure that they to make sure that I'm passing policies that they can implement very well given their resources, which are county-wide. So I think making sure that those go hand in hand and working closely together will be a great way to do that.
Indu?
Well, as someone who has been involved in CRAS for the last 3 years, I know for a fact that they're the epitome of student voice and student leadership. And unfortunately, in the last few years, we haven't really been able to have a close relationship with our SMOBs. And if elected, I want to prioritize that because if we attend SMOB town halls, you see these sessions where students are able to express their concerns. And every meeting, we always have a plethora of concerns and issues that students bring up that often go unheard. So it's a wonderful opportunity to hear those voices and collaborate with CRASC and students to make sure that we are bringing progressive policies. And CRASC isn't the only student body out there. We also have school SGAs, we also have groups like teen advisories, and so many different student-based groups. Let's Talk Justice, I love them, the leadership team for service. So working with all of these groups and making sure that they're included in the policy decision-making process.
Eric?
Okay, so I've only been a part of CRASC for 1 year, but I love it. I think that it's a great organization. I love all the people that are in CRASC. And so definitely one of the things that I plan on doing to collaborate with them is not only attending meetings, but also sharing opportunities for our CRASC, exec team members, our CRASC, just people who are attending meetings. One of the most important things to me is testimony. So when it comes to that, if there's something that's coming up, a board policy that's coming up that could use the student voice, sharing that opportunity with our CRASC teams because often those are the students who they're very involved with their schools. They have they have great input. So sharing testimony opportunities with our CRASC team, working with them so that they can testify to see, to get past what the students want to see in our school system.
Okay. We can start with Taryn with rebuttals.
So I think that, and do what you said, that CRASC is the epitome of student leadership. I think that is true, but to an extent, because I think a lot of times, especially since COVID and things have gone virtual, different schools aren't getting as involved. I know in Apples High School, we're not very involved in CRASC because we've been dealing with so many of our own issues that are still very important and are county-wide, but we've been kind of putting out our own fires at Annapolis and trying to make sure we're getting back to where we were before COVID. So I think that making sure we're listening to CRASC, yes, but I think also recognizing there are other
Time.
students.
Any other rebuttals?
Oh, yeah.
Indu?
Well, I definitely agree with you, Taryn, and that's why I said that prioritizing other school SGAs, making school visitation, and working with other student groups. And when I said Kraska's epitome of student leadership, I meant that their dedication to the student voice. We actively provide board testimonies. We actively work with the Maryland General Assembly and work to collect as many as perspectives as possible. So that's what I meant when I said epitome.
Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on. The next question is going to start with Indu. If elected, the SMOB is a voting member of the MASC Executive Board. How will you use your position to advocate for change at the state level?
Thank you. I guess one big component is, again, advertising these opportunities, making sure that more students are aware of MASC and that together we are bringing the Anne Arundel County perspective to MASC meetings. It's also making sure I'm consistently attending these meetings and looking at state policies. Again, with like past experiences, I worked on the state level. I've seen the policy making process and making sure Anne Arundel County is more involved in our ability to roll out the blueprint, which is the MSDE plan for future education. So definitely making sure students are involved, that we're bringing back opportunities, and that I myself am a proactive member of MASC.
Eric?
So this year, getting involved with MASC as a workshop presenter and the event coordinator for the Division 4 committee, I've been able to experience how great of an organization MASC is, and all of the power that all of the great things that it does in terms of testifying in front of the Maryland General Assembly. So what I would do, so one of the things that I want to advocate for is free lunches, following other states that have already passed legislation to get free lunches and breakfast into all of our schools. So what I would like to do is work with the MASC Special Issues Department, because there has been bills in the past that have supported free lunches and breakfast for students in Maryland, but they really haven't gone anywhere. So working with the Special Issues Department to get a bunch of students together and testify in the Maryland General Assembly that we as students support the right to a nutritious and free of charge breakfast and lunch.
Taryn?
Well, so as I mentioned previously, I have spoken on I have testified in front of the Maryland Senate in the past, which has allowed me, which was a great opportunity and experience for me because I worked with multiple people, multiple senators, multiple delegates, and multiple activists from across the state, which meant that I was already able to work on understanding different perspectives and understanding the unique issues, but overall the broad issue, which I think is kind of what MASC does. But also specifically though, one of the policies that I'm advocating for is providing calculators for all students during standardized testing, because at Annapolis High School, we've seen firsthand the inequality that causes during PSATs, during AP tests, the fact that students can't get access to the calculators and things like that, which is a state issue. So something like that, I would love to work with MASC on instituting that statewide by working with other SMOBs to make sure that we're doing it at a county level or state level, whatever we need to do to get it done.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
I do have one rebuttals. I love your point on the calculators, but I do kind of want to say that is College Board policy. So College Board proactively says that unfortunately, if you do not have a calculator that day, you're not allowed, like your school can't give you one. So that is like one thing that it's not our school or our state that's able to control, but rather a completely separate corporation.
Taryn?
Well, I think what I'm saying with that is, giving students, $5 to go buy a calculator or selling calculators for them before these tests. So that way they're giving the students the money to buy these calculators or going out, because a lot of the times it is hard for, yes, College Board says that, but I think providing the funding for that and saying, hey, look, here's calculators we're selling for $3, $5 for you to be able to do well on your standardized testing is a great opportunity, and giving them the money to do that is a great way for students to feel like they are at an equal level.
Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next question, which will start with Eric. Describe a time you have advocated for your beliefs.
So I think I've talked a lot about state and local government, so I'm going to pivot towards school SGA. So this year, Sonoma Park got new administration, so we really were able to expand what we are able to do in terms of spirit days and all that kind of good stuff, right? So one of the things I think that I've advocated for was, having a more, student, fun spirit days with our administration. So working with groups of adults to get stuff that students want passed at the school level. So stuff like anything but backpack day at our school, hats versus hoods, all that kind of good stuff. So just at the school level, I've already been, pushing or working with administration to get what students want to see in our schools done. And now I plan to continue that with the same energy at the board.
Taryn?
So, as I previously said, Annapolis, we've been doing a lot of issues at our school, like, just because we're coming out of COVID. It was kind of weird getting back into it for us, at our school specifically. So I know one big thing that students have always been kind of upset about is we didn't have a dance last year. My sophomore year, so 2021, 2022 school year, we didn't have a school dance at all because they were worried about COVID restrictions while other schools were able to have one. So what I planned all of my sophomore year after getting that no is I worked towards to make sure that we were able to have a dance this school year, and we actually have been able to have two successful dances, a homecoming dance and also a unified celebration dance to celebrate us being a top 5 unified champion school in the nation. And these two and but it was a lot of work on my end to make sure that the administration saw that we could pull it off and we could pull dances, because it's a great way to increase student engagement and school spirit, which is something I think is great for all students to get involved in.
Indu?
So this year, Dr. Bedell posed this amazing progressive not progressive policy, but progressive budget for our next fiscal year, 2024. And they included initiatives such as expanding more opportunities for students who are marginalized or low socioeconomic status. It included expanding teacher hirings to include more diverse teachers, and also expanding, teacher wages. And we were concerned that this might be something that would get held up at the Board of Education. So working with the Joint Commission, I developed several testimonies in support of this budget to make sure that students and teachers are getting these much needed resources. And currently I'm working on more testimonies for our county council and county executive to make sure this will go all the way through. Thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question, starting off from Taryn. If you had the ability to relocate money in the budget, what would you change?
Well, so as I said previously, my younger sister has severe special needs, and I feel like a lot of students in this county are being underserved because they're like whether it be IEPs, 504s, or being in self-contained classrooms, which is a classroom where only students with IEPs would be in that classroom. So I think allocating more money to these programs and making sure, because we've seen a significant surge in the amount of students who are requiring IEPs or an individualized education and more attention as coming out of the pandemic. So I think making sure that we're giving more money to allocate for this surge in need, and also making sure that all students that we're giving more money to this program to make sure that all students are getting the best education for them as a unique individual, because each student is a unique student and we need to recognize that.
Indu?
Well, I think one important thing to recognize is we have one holistic budget. So you're going to have to make budget cuts somewhere. And I definitely propose maybe textbooks, because we know that we have been more reliant on digital textbooks and paper textbooks. So cutting costs there. Additionally, it's also focusing on where we're getting these resources, things like, office materials. Are we going through private contractors or retail prices? So comparing prices and seeing how can we lower costs, and in terms of allocating, definitely placing an emphasis on more educational opportunities, more college and career preparedness, making sure that we're having opportunities for all students. So if you look in the budget, you see that there has been a significant cut in vocational and STEM programs from the fiscal year 2021 and this proposed budget. So making sure that we're expanding these opportunities, because every student should come to school with a purpose and feel that they have a purpose. So it's really making sure that these educational opportunities are still getting funding.
Eric?
So one of the things in my platform that I advocate for is for teacher compensation. So Anne Arundel County is the third wealthiest county in the state, but yet it ranks 19th out of 24 in starting teacher salary, and our average salary is about $7,000 lower than the state average. And so what does that mean for students? That means that with neighboring counties, new teachers or teachers might be leaving our school system to go to those counties, and we're losing high quality, diverse educators that could be educating our students, giving our students a greater education. So what would I like to do? Reallocate money to increasing our starting teacher salaries to match and exceed neighboring counties. And secondly, making sure that our veteran teachers, our teachers who have been in our school system for a long time, are on the correct pay grade, because I want to make sure that our great excellent educators are staying in our county so that they can continue to provide a high quality education educational experience for all of our students.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
I want to add one thing. I also advocated for like having more wages for teachers and making competitive wages, but I do want to add that with this proposed budget that Dr. Bedell is proposing for the next year, teacher wages and salary increase is being a main priority. So in fact, 78.4% of the budget is dedicated to salaries, teacher salaries, and making sure that we are having competitive wages. So this is already in the process, and I think next board members just making sure that this is happening and completely following through. Thank you.
Any other rebuttals? Eric?
So my main goal really is, so with the next proposal, so with the Maryland Blueprint by 2026, all of our starting teacher salaries will be at least $60,000 a year. But really setting up our county, so whereas, once that all of our school systems are starting at 60,000, surely there will be other counties who are trying to go above that to create competition, and making sure that we are one of those counties so that we can continue to hire diverse and high quality educators.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question. Indu, you'll be starting. So this question was submitted by Katarina from Severna Park High School. How do you plan to accomplish your platform goals in 1 year term?
Thank you, Katerina. But I think one big emphasis is making sure allocation, or not allocation, but delegation, right? Not making sure that I'm not going to be the only one working on policies, working with student leaders across the county and making sure that they're being involved in this process and prioritizing what students need. If students feel that, addressing the educational gap is the biggest priority, focusing on that. Well, I will say one main focus for me will definitely be school safety, but definitely making sure, like looking in their school environments, looking at what are the pressing concerns and prioritizing those concerns. Another component to keep in mind is as a student member, we have the shortest term. We have 1 year. So you might not be able to fully concretely establish every single initiative, but at least you're starting a path for those initiatives to continue in the future years. And that's what a lot of our past moms do too.
Eric?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I would focus on my top 5 policy priorities, which are things that that I have formulated based on what I've heard from a lot of different students. So those are things like reforming our world language curriculum, so that what students are learning, their Spanish, their French, their Chinese, they're actually able to use it in real life to talk to other people in that language. Other things include the dress code, which a lot of students have brought up to me as well from all different schools. So first and foremost, focusing on my top 5 policy priorities. Additionally, as Indu said, really setting up future SMOBs to continue on the legacy of what I established. So recognizing that, my term is only 1 year, there's only so much I can do in 1 year, but, setting things up so that the future SMOBs can take over and continue to, push for those things if they're not able to be accomplished within a year.
Taryn?
Well, so I think the best thing that we can do is make sure that a lot of these changes that we need to do as student member of the board, my job is to convince the Board of Education that would be sitting here saying this is the best decision for the students and it is achievable. So I think the best way that I'm going to do that, and my plan is to do with local plans to each school and talking to the administration and checking in with administration saying, hey, you can implement this change, and making sure I have the backing and the support of multiple middle schools, high schools, elementary schools, whatever it may be, that this is affecting, whatever a policy may be affecting or a policy I want to push for is affecting, to make sure that I'm showing the board that we can do this. And so that way there has to be less time spent on deliberation and more time on planning and more time on already implementing it in the schools. And I think the best way to set up future SMOBs is making sure the budget that we pass is achieving my goals and making sure that budget will be more permanent than I will be. So making sure that stays and is what we need.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
Not a rebuttal, but essentially kind of adding on that the best way to truly serve your community is getting involved in your community. Too often, board members and I guess even, as current mobs, I'm sure it's easy to kind of get lost in what the true needs of the community are. So basically making sure that you are actively in the community, being a part of these initiatives and programs to establish these things. So I talked about these meeting with school visitations, being in those communities, talking about their needs. When we're launching different pilot programs, being there at each launch and seeing how each program plays out and just really being involved.
Time. Any rebuttals? Eric?
Again, not necessarily a rebuttal. I do agree with Indu, which is why, if elected, I will definitely be working just like other SMOBs have done in other counties, visiting students during their lunches, all middle school, high school students, even elementary schoolers. I love talking to elementary schoolers. They're awesome. Visiting all of our schools, listening to them, seeing what's going on in their schools, what I can do to help. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question, and we are going to start with Eric. As a board member, you will regularly hear questions and concerns about individual school issues, teachers, and administrations. How will you go about following up and seeing these issues addressed?
So maintaining perseverance and persistent consistency. And so what that means is, so if a teacher is bringing up an issue to me, like I'm seeing that there's an issue going on within a school, first seeing what can be done at the school level. So if there's an issue that can be resolved right at the school level, let's resolve it there. Work with our administration. But if it's something that has to be addressed at the board, and see if it's something that again has to be addressed at the board, following up consistently to make sure that what needs to be done is getting done. And what that can look like is not only just emailing the administration at that school, but if I'm not getting a response back, personally going to that school and having a meeting with that administration to go, okay, this is a problem that I've seen that one of your staff or one of the students has brought up. We haven't really you haven't really addressed it yet. What can we do now? I'm here with you. What can we do to address those issues?
Taryn?
Well, I think the best way to start with this is to make sure that if it's resolved at the school level, great. If we need to bring it to the board level, we do that promptly and efficiently, so that way that immediate change is taking place and the administrations can go in and implement whatever that change may be. But then later on, I think the most important part of this is following up first with the administration of that school, with the principal, with the assistant principals, and saying, hey, you are doing this, right? And if they're saying, yeah, we're doing this, look at these results, look, it is getting better, saying, okay, that's great. But then also, furthermore, checking in with schools and checking in with students to make sure that each individual student, and making sure that the students themselves are feeling that change on top of the administration seeing that change, because sometimes there is that disconnect between the administration and the students. So making sure that all are feeling it, and all students, teachers, and administration are reaping the benefits.
Indu?
So I know one of the biggest complaints from students and teachers is easily the bureaucracy that is prevalent in our county. And the best way to cut through that is, again, being directly involved in schools. So I mentioned a SMOB Teen Advisory Council. So if a personal concern is being raised at one specific school, working with those representatives and working with them and connecting with administration and different people in charge. So we are bringing effective solutions and that we're implementing change that's effective. And if this is something that progresses to the board level, similar to what my fellow competitors said, is definitely making sure that we're being persistent and tenacious in ensuring that this is being accomplished, that we are fully following through, and not losing sight of our true purpose, which is serving our schools.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
So just to add something on, so Indu is correct. There is a lot of red tape at the board, just because, it is a bureaucracy. And so what can we do to, kind of just avoid that red tape altogether, avoid having to go near that? Like I said, creating a student ambassador program at every single school so that students can talk to their administration directly and express their concerns of what's going on in their school and find solutions right there at the school level where there's less red tape before we even have to escalate down to the board level. And then, of course, having those students be able to. Thank you.
Time. Any other rebuttals? Taryn?
I just think that it's definitely important to hear from students and to make sure that they feel like their voice is being heard. But I think it's also equally important to make sure these students feel like if it does need to progress to the board level, we don't try and stop them at the school level and say, you feel like this needs to come to the board level. Come in, come testify, come tell us, give us a reason. So that way we make sure these students, we're not trying to immediately nip it in the bud at the at the school level. So that way students can bring it to the higher level if they feel it needs to be brought there.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals?
I definitely do agree with Taryn that we want to make sure that civic engagement among students is growing, but it's also like the idea of like, if it's possible to address it at the school level, let's work on that. Because even at CRAS, we always talk about if something you can address at your school, we will help you address it. But if it is something that needs to go higher, of course, we will always encourage it. And that's why I'm proposing having testimony workshops so students feel that they themselves can be advocates and be prepared to present testimonies at the board.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question, which will start with Taryn. What additional support can AACPS offer to non-English speaking students?
So at Annapolis High School, we have a large number of non-speaking students. Everything that we do at our school is in two languages. We have hundreds of students who are in ESOL and who are non-native English speakers. And I think the best way we can do this is making sure we have as many resources as possible in Spanish, and also making sure that they have an adult who checks in with them in Spanish at their school weekly and comes into a class of maybe non-English learners and says and talks to them in that language and says, pardon, they say everything that they need to know in Spanish, because I know a lot of times students might not know about homecoming ticket sales or prom ticket sales because they're not in a different language. Pardon, but making sure that they're accessible to all students at that level and making sure that someone's checking in with them to make sure they are receiving that in Spanish.
Indu?
I always mention like it's so important to embrace diversity, and a big component of this is making sure that we are having more resources that help these students who might be struggling in English, and that's like through English language specialists, making sure that we're having more of these individuals present. But we should also encourage the fact that these students are speaking another language. It's beautiful. It adds to our culture. So that means having, again, diverse teachers who are being selected to serve and teach, teachers who can maybe connect better with their students or their specific demographic. Additionally, it's making sure that we're bringing all students together in school events, so having more cultural events or more events, community events that focus on all students being together, all students, and having services that are able to be used for all students. So just more of those culture and community bringing events.
Eric?
So growing up with two immigrant parents, they spoke very little English, and the English that they spoke was very broken. And so there would be at times when, there would be times when I had to go to a doctor's appointment and there would be an early dismissal. And I just remember one time that, because my mother didn't speak very fluently in English and she needed additional support, that the school staff was kind of rude and dismissive. And so seeing that really makes me want to continue to promote hiring diverse staff at all of our schools. You know, Anne Arundel County is a very diverse county, so having diverse staff naturally seems fitting. Also, continuing to have staff training, especially for our staff that are working with, our front office staff that are constantly working with parents on a daily basis, making sure that they are promoting diversity and that they are patient, especially with our parents and grandparents that don't speak English as their first language.
Any rebuttals?
Not a rebuttal, but more of an addition is like this is definitely a big concern. Is like how can we reach out to our parents and community members who might not be fluent in English? And that is one big thing the Joint Commission was talking about is the fact that we need to have more educational materials or things that parents like. I know parents, we get our syllabuses, we get those syllabuses, we get a bunch of developmental materials for especially younger children. So making sure we're having more resources that are in multiple languages, so more parents can get involved in the children's education.
Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next question, and Indu, you will be starting. The school board will be receiving a recommendation for phase 1 of redistricting in July 2023. How will you balance the perspectives of families, community stakeholders, educational consultants, and AACPS staff?
Thank you, Michelle. I think one big component to talk about is the fact phase 1 will compose of schools from northern parts of the county. And I'm from Glen Burnie. That is one of these schools. And again, it's really making sure that parents, community members understand the need for districting in an equitable manner. Glen Burnie High School is so overpopulated. Our teacher-student ratios are insane. There is not enough resources to go around because also keep in mind, our school can't exactly afford all of this. Just making sure that we're having equitable distribution where and it's also embracing diversity. It's making sure that even schools in southern counties or southern part of our counties are having more students being kind of shifted around. And of course, making sure that we're working with parents to make sure is this convenient for you? Is this something you're able to take care of? Because I know that transportation, things like these are major issue, but together, just really promoting equity within education.
Eric?
So redistricting is kind of a complicated topic that, most people, you have to invest time into it in order to really understand what's going on. So one of the things I like to do is work with our communications office to create easy to understand infographics that can be sent out to parents, students, community stakeholders, so that they can easily understand how am I going to be impacted by redistricting, what's going on in our county, all that kind of stuff. Additionally, really making sure that, we're talking to the people who are actually being impacted by the redistricting. So parents and students getting their input above, maybe above others, because they are the ones who are ultimately going to be impacted by this redistricting.
Taryn?
I think the first thing that we need to do is make sure that the numbers are right, and making sure I think the primary concern here should be making sure that there is no overpopulation when we are redistricting, making sure we're not giving one school too many students, and if we are, compensating for that with extra teachers and extra resources and extra money to that school. And then I think the next thing we need to look at is how are these districts designed? Are they designed by zip code? Are they designed to be gerrymandered? Are they designed to be are they designed to be equitable and made sure that it's each school is getting the resources it needs based on where these students are in that school. And I think the best thing that we can do with that is listening to the parents, listening to the students, and listening to the administrations and all the schools who would be affected by this, and all of the parents, to make sure that they still feel like their student would go to a fair school, and it would be a fair redistricting, and by making sure they understand what's actually happening.
I definitely agree with Taryn because equity in education is a priority. That's why I definitely will push out equity audits. So we are doing boundary analysis for every school district to see what are the numbers, what are the issues prevalent, and how can we redistribute students in an equitable manner so that every student is having access to a quality education. Just because you're from one zip code or you're from one community, that should not affect your ability to get a quality education.
Any other rebuttals? Starting off with Eric.
Not a rebuttal in addition. I agree with Indu. It's very important that we're actually promoting equity, not equality. So equity means fair, equality means equal. We shouldn't be, really funding our schools equally because we have students in our county that have more need as opposed to others. So funding our schools equitably would look like providing more money and funding to schools that have students that have more need, as opposed to others that don't, who are privileged enough to not have, to not need as much. Funding.
Taryn?
I think that another thing that also needs to be taken into account while doing redistricting is, yes, student equity, making sure that each school has the appropriate needs for what it needs, which is, yes, made up of which students are there and what areas they're from and what challenges they're facing, but also factoring in magnet programs, which are very prevalent in this county. As a magnet student myself, I'll see I have there's a lot of students in my magnet program who maybe who aren't necessarily zoned for my school. So making sure we're also taking that into account when doing equity is something that we should definitely focus on.
Awesome. Any other rebuttals? See, and then we're going to move on to the next question, starting with Eric. Describe your leadership style.
Okay. So definitely, this is something that I'm very open. And so what that looks like is open to ideas, open to suggestions. So, as a leader, it's important to set boundaries and deadlines and all that kind of stuff, but it's equally important to listen to the people that you're working with to make sure that, their input is being heard and that, their input is being heard and they have a say in, what's going on. And so as a leader, I strive to always be very open, to be an active listener, and to really make sure that all perspectives are being heard so that the decision that is made, the outcome, is the best for all.
Taryn?
I think the best word that sums up my leadership style is relatable, because I fully understand that I don't know everything. I'm one person with one perspective, and there are lots of students with differing perspectives and different experiences that we needed to factor in, which is why that I think as a leader, what I always try to do is listen to everyone else and listen to what they're saying and where they're coming from before even thinking about what the solution could be. Because a lot of the times I understand what I think the solution may be. I have an idea of what it is, but I know at the end of the day that maybe that's that's the solution I'm thinking that could benefit me. And I try to include perspectives, and I try to make sure I'm thinking about everyone when I'm making decisions at an individual level. But when being a leader, my main focus is always making sure I'm doing what's best overall for the whole group, for the whole class, for the whole county, and for all of the students, which is what I would do if elected, making sure I'm listening to you.
Indu?
I said this once and I'll say it again. I think a true leader is someone who's willing to get involved and get their hands dirty. And I would definitely describe my leadership style as that. I'm someone who's always involved, who's always ready to help out anywhere I can. And that is evident in my work with CRAS, SGA, and other leadership positions where I'm always within the community, working with the community, and service and serving back my community is my biggest priority. Of course, also making sure that I'm working well with others and collaborating with others, that all voices are being taken into consideration and that we are one group and not just a tyranny almost.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question, starting with Taryn. How do you define success when evaluating the school system?
I think the best way to define success is that every single student has a sense of belonging when they walk through the doors of their school. When Dr. Bedell came and spoke to my high school, to Annapolis High School, at our unified celebration, those were the words he used: sense of belonging, because that's what we were being recognized for, giving students that sense of belonging, and we were nationally recognized for that because every student felt like on that day at that basketball game, every student felt like they were involved. And I think success in Anne Arundel County as the school system will be building that sense of belonging for every student and making sure that every day, whether it doesn't matter if it's a normal school day or you're being recognized for a national championship, you should feel like you belong at your school. And I think making sure that we have 100% of students who feel like they belong and who feel like they can walk through the doors of their school and feel like their voice is heard and that they matter at their school, that's what success would be.
Indu?
Well, in terms of measuring success, there's always the quantitative and the qualitative. So the quantitative is definitely the idea that all our students feel safe, that they feel welcome, that they feel inclusive, and that they're giving educational opportunities where they feel they can truly succeed in. It's that sense of belonging, like Taryn said, which I totally agree with, and that sense of purpose, that you're walking to school every day because you think that you have a purpose in this world, that you belong, and that you are dedicated, and that you deserve the world. That is my biggest priority. Quantitatives is the idea that we're measuring things through surveys, making sure that we are having student satisfaction, that we're working with parents, teachers, faculty, that everyone feels that their voice has been represented during my term, that they feel that education has progressed and that we are really moving towards a better AACPS for tomorrow.
Eric?
So first and foremost, I think something a lot of students hear is that, test scores don't define success, and that is completely true. Some of the brightest people that I've met are not good test takers. And so how I would measure success is, are students do students feel like they're learning in our schools? Do students feel like what they're learning in schools can be applied in real life? And, like Indu and Taryn have mentioned, do students feel like they have a sense of belonging in school? Are they safe in school? All of those measures would be what I take into consideration when determining whether or not our school system is succeeding. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to our next question. And Indu, you'll be starting this one off. So this question was inspired from Jaden from South River High School. How will you work to minimize the influence of politics on education and educational policies?
Oh, Jane, I love you for that. We would definitely agree that the Board of Education composes of some ideological warfare, but I think as a really important component as the student leader is maintaining that sense of neutrality and making it clear that you're here as a student representative and your sole purpose is to make sure education is being efficient and full of quality for students. And frankly, education should not be a matter of politics. Your personal ideologies, beliefs, or perspectives should not be influencing our curriculum, the resources that are available to students. Your biggest priority is making sure that you're serving students and making that clear and as assertive as I can while being respectful. But I think that is the best way. And working with the board members and making sure that we are approaching policies that are neutral in nature, but at the same time still helping students.
Eric?
So I think often, there are people that bring up the fact that, the Board of Education, there's politics involved. But for me personally, I am going to maintain an unbiased stance. So whether that's listening to one perspective or another, I will continue to maintain an open ear. And whatever I'm fighting for what's best for our students. So if that's, so regardless of what side that's coming from, maintaining that neutrality and continuing to make sure that, my opinion isn't swaying one way or another. It's swaying towards what's best for students.
Taryn?
Well, I think something that we oftentimes forget is that, which I mean, we see every day. As a student, I can't vote. I'm 17. I can't vote in an actual election. Like I'm an actual political election at like a federal or state level. I can't vote. So I think that actually gives me. Well, I'd love to vote. I'd be totally honest. I think that gives me a lot of. That gives me that a very unique perspective. And yes, I follow politics, and yes, I follow current events, and yes, I understand that. But also. I, as a student right now, I'm learning about all sides and all opinions, and I'm not necessarily making a decision. I'm just kind of absorbing it all, which is, I think, great because as I'm not voting, I don't have to actually make a firm decision on what I think is best. Because at the end of the day, I think they're politically, you could say there are great ideas from both sides, and I think we need to make sure that we're listening to that we're trying to push both sides out though and keep it as nonpartisan as possible.
Thank you. Any rebuttals?
Again, not a rebuttal, but an addition. I think another key component is education. It's making sure that policies are not leaning towards one way or another. It's making sure that people understand that these policies are solely pushed out to help benefit students, and making sure we're having more of these conversations with community and interest groups who might feel strongly about certain issues. It's making sure that they know and educating them that this policy is not geared towards diminishing your power or diminishing your values, but simply to help students. And having that collaborative voice in the community is very important.
Thank you. Any other rebuttals? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next question, starting with Eric. In this position, you will be lobbied by many special interest groups within the community, such as TAC, CRASC, and the PTA. Is there one group whose perspective you would consider more than others? If so, why?
So this is a question that I have heard before from our interviews, but I will answer with the exact same answer that I gave to the interview panel. No. So as a student member of the Board of Education, yes, I am here to listen to students, and students will be a priority for me, making sure that the students' voice is expressed across, especially since, there's one student on a board of 7 people, 8 people. So it's important that, as that one student voice, that I'm making sure that the student's voice is the priority for me. However, with other interest organizations, I'm very open to listening to, our community stakeholders, like I mentioned. So that includes TAC, and making sure that, I will not prioritize one over the other. I will listen to all of them to create the best solutions and best education possible for our students.
Taryn?
So I think, unfortunately, in this county, and in a lot of counties, when it comes to making policy, we often ignore the students because we think they're too young and we think they don't know what they're talking about. When in reality, they're the ones who are experiencing any changes that are made at the board level and at the Board of Education. So I think at the end of the day, if I had to pick, I would probably pick CRAS because as a representation of the students, I would pick the students over. I would pick the students because that's who I'm representing, and they're the ones who are experiencing this. And to me, I think that's the experience and life experience and actual experience instead of just standing there talking about it or from a removed perspective is the best way that we're going to understand what really is best. Because yeah, maybe our brains are still developing, but I think we know what's best for us on certain policies, on like 99.9% of policies. And we know what's going to best benefit us and what could hurt us. So I think they're the ones I would listen to the most.
Similar to Eric, I'm going to stay true to my response at the interview. And yes, my interview was students, CRASC, because we are a board member who has been elected by the students. And I would say my top priority is serving back those students and, of course, the teachers, because we're all one holistic community, of course. But making sure that we are elevating the student voice because historically, and just looking at day-to-day events, teachers and students are the students who are the individuals who are the most oppressed, or their voices are not the most heard at board meetings or in general policy making. So just making sure that those those perspectives are being catered, and we, as a unique position of student member on the Board of Education, are staying true to our title and upholding a student voice. And of course, I agree, we need to work with other interest groups as well, but if I had to prioritize, I will forever and will always prioritize the student voice.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Seeing none, we are going to move on to our last and final question candidates. So we're going to start this off with Taryn. What is one thing you admire about the other candidates?
I think the thing I admire most about both Eric and Indu is how passionate they are about this position and the life experience that they have similar to me. Because that was my one fear, that's why I ran, because I was worried someone with no life experience would be on there, someone who just was clicking a box in their resume, making themselves look good to colleges, someone who didn't really care. So I think that's the thing I admire most about both Eric and Indu, is that they both really care, and they each have their different reasons for caring, but they're both very equally good reasons, and that's just, it makes me know that whichever one of us wins, we all have our unique life perspectives, but it's made sure that each and every one of us cares, and that's, I think, the best thing that they each have.
Indu?
Well, thank you for that, Taryn. And similarly, I will say Taryn's unfiltered passion. Like when she walks in, she comes in with so much passion in her voice, and you can tell that she truly cares about her issues. And especially when she made those connections to her personal experience and family life, that's what truly warmed my heart. And that's why I think she's like wonderful. I love her passion. And Eric, his innovative ideas, like fact he's working to take perspectives from like outside the state, that's really amazing. And that he's bringing like something new to the table, and that's definitely awesome.
Eric?
So for both candidates, I applaud their courage for applying for this position and, wanting to represent the students' voice, bringing ideas that they believe will better our students' lives to the table. For Taryn, I recently met Taryn, so I don't know a lot about her, but just hearing, I love her inclusive policies, how she's trying to make sure everybody has a sense of belonging in our county. And for Indu, I've known Indu for a little bit longer, and I will say that Indu's drive is really what gets me. I love that she is motivated and she has perseverance, and she's constantly striving to make sure that students have the best quality education that they can have in Anne Arundel County.
Any rebuttals? Seeing none, thank you for attending or viewing the 2023 to 2024 student member of the board debate of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Best of luck to all three candidates at the April 27th elections. To those of you in person, feel free to stick around for a little bit to converse with the candidates before we close the event. Good night and have a fantastic evening.